It is 7:25 on the dot, so we will resume. I'd like to welcome everyone to our electronic regional council meeting on March 23rd, 2022. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Regional Council is practicing physical distancing. I'm present in council chambers and the other members are participating electronically. I will now ask the clerk to do roll call.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Rubanovic.
Present.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Jowett. Councillor Erb.
I'm here. Sorry about that.
Gotcha. Councillor Nowak.
Present.
Councillor Kiefer. Councillor McGarry.
Present.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Harris. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Strickland.
Here.
Councillor Foxton. Councillor Galloway.
Present.
And we have regrets from Councillor Rentz. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Will. I will now ask for a motion to reconvene in open session. If I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Galloway. Please use your icons to vote that Regional Council reconvene in open session. That is carried, colleagues. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we gather virtually today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. What I have learned from Indigenous people is that our relationship to the land should be one of stewardship rather than ownership, and I'm honored to make this journey with them. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I would now invite Dr. Wong and David Aoki to give an update on COVID and vaccine. So over to you, Dr. Wong.
Thank you, Chair Redmond, and good evening, Council. So Kathy has projected my slides. I'll start as usual with the key messages. One, as emergency and mandatory measures are lifting, we are transitioning to managing COVID differently. This does not mean the pandemic is over. We should not be surprised to see intermittent waves and waning immunity. Two, COVID continues to be with us and will likely present future challenges. We can weather future challenges by continuing to work together as we have done to date. And three, the key to balancing, reducing the severe impacts of COVID-19 and reducing social disruption is for us to use the tools we have when we need them. These include staying up to date with COVID-19 vaccines, staying home when sick, optimizing indoor air ventilation, and masking in indoor environments during periods of high risk. Next slide, please. Our key indicators are much lower than they were at the height of the Omicron wave. However, the virus continues to circulate and overall indicators are plateauing. Our latest wastewater data shown in this slide, which uses a logarithmic scale going up tenfold each level, indicates that the COVID-19 wastewater signal continues to plateau at relatively high levels. BA1 continues to be the primary sublineage of Omicron with a moderate presence of the BA2 sublineage of Omicron. This has not changed for a few weeks. The 7-day moving average percent positivity has slightly increased to 13.7%, which is following the provincial trends of slightly increasing percent positivity, decreasing testing volumes. The number of outbreaks in high-risk settings is low and stable. Hospitalizations also remain low and stable at this time. Next slide, please. The Ontario Science Table has recently projected that hospitalizations and ICU admissions will likely increase for the next few weeks to a moderate extent, but not to the very elevated extent as seen at the peak of the Omicron wave. A person's risk of contracting COVID-19 will depend on the number of close contacts, their vaccination status, and the spread of the more transmissible BA.2 subvariant of Omicron. Modeling from last week's science table based on Ontario data suggests that a third dose offers better protection against Omicron infection over time than 2 doses as shown in the graph. I therefore urge all residents of Waterloo Region to complete their vaccine series, even if they have been previously infected. A complete series is currently 2 doses in children, 3 doses in adults, 4 doses in long-term care home residents and other eligible high-risk groups. Last slide, please. Finally, as we transition to managing COVID-19 differently going forward, for the second quarter of this year at least, David Aoki and I plan to continue to provide regular updates at the monthly council meetings, so approximately once a month. If there is a need for more timely or frequent updates, however, I will continue to be available to provide ad hoc updates as well. Thank you, and I will now pass it over to David Aoki.
Thank you. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Today's our dashboard indicates that 88.8% of those 5 years of age and older have at least 1 dose, and 85.5% are fully vaccinated. In addition, 54.7% of those eligible for a third dose have received their booster. Our mobile strategy is having great effect to reach more residents who have barriers to traditional immunization clinics. We are offering clinics in more than 20 locations weekly, and the week of April 4th, we look forward to having the vaccine bus back on the road, adding more opportunities for residents to receive their immunizations. We successfully ran our first partnered clinic with the Kitchener Rangers this past Sunday, and look forward to a second clinic at this upcoming Sunday's game. First, second, and third doses are available to ticket-holding fans. The vaccination clinic is located inside the subscribers' lounge and is open from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. on game day. No appointment is needed, and we encourage people to drop by and get vaccinated. This week, we are also hosting our last clinic with our Kids Ability partner. We have been running clinics with Kids Ability since the 5 to 11 shots were announced in December. The Kids Ability clinics have offered a sensory-friendly vaccination clinic for children between 5 and 17 years of age who need additional support when receiving COVID-19 vaccines. We've held 13 clinics over the last 3 months and provided almost 550 doses. We want to thank Kids Ability for hosting these clinics and for their staff who help support the clients to ensure they receive vaccine in a safe and supportive environment. For parents who may still have concerns about sensory safe environments for children requiring vaccines, we encourage them to contact their primary care provider or to contact public health with details on our website to help arrange the best location and options for your child's particular needs. We will continue to urge residents who want to receive their first, second, third doses to find out where our clinics are located and what times they're available on the region's website and through our social media. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wong and David. Councillor Ravanovich, do you have a question or a comment?
Both, if I may, Madam Chair. First of all, just from a comment perspective, as I guess we hit the 2-year mark since we declared the emergency on Friday, I really do want to take this opportunity to and I know we've done this before, but I think it's appropriate to thank Dr. Wong and David and those who came before them and those who have worked with them throughout the past 2 years. I mean, this has been and an unbelievable journey for all of us, but particularly for them and so many others on our staff teams who have really supported the community throughout this region. As we've dealt with this, and so I think certainly for me, and I'm sure others feel this way too, a heartfelt thank you for your incredible leadership and your dedication and your commitment to public service. I know from a pandemic perspective, our former CAO Mike Murray, and then now over the past year, Bruce has certainly been leading things with our corporate emergency management team as well in all this, and want to acknowledge them as well. From a question point of view, I have two, and so my first one, Dr. Wong, is just as you talk about what might happen sort of going forward, and we're seeing right now in Europe and Netherlands, Australia, and a number of places, sort of the next wave, and I guess it's focused around BA2 is what I'm hearing. Any sense of what we might expect here, what and what we can learn from them in that regard in terms of how they're dealing with it and responding, because they also reopened, and I'm not sure, I haven't followed that closely to know how they're reacting.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Vermanovic. It's an excellent one. It is difficult to anticipate what may happen here, because BA2 is still a subvariant of Omicron. So while it is highly transmissible, it's believed to be the most transmissible to date, about 30% more transmissible than the BA1 subvariant, which is the original subvariant of Omicron that places like Canada, Ontario here experienced. The early evidence seems to indicate that, people who have already been infected with BA1 are at much lower risk of being reinfected. And we also know that, many people got their booster recently, and that also reduces the risk of being infected. The vaccines, whether it's 2 or 3 doses, 3 being better, obviously, but even with 2, it does reduce severe impacts, but it wasn't so good to only have 2 in terms of avoiding infection. But with a booster that increased your protection against infection itself as well. And so what the experts are anticipating is that we likely will see some increase in infections as people's behavior changes, and as requirements are lifted. But at the same time, there is already a significant level of community immunity to this, or partial at least to this subvariant, because it's still a subvariant of Omicron. So that is why I think the best course of action for residents is to remain cautious and prudent. I know I've been saying that for 2 years, and people wish that wasn't the case still, but I recommend that people, resume their activities gradually. They reduce the measures that they take, including indoor masking, gradually, right? We're still in the winter respiratory season. We just got a case of flu, for example. So we are still in that season, and that's a season for which I do recommend people continue to mask indoors. And so I think, in Ontario, we actually have been taking it slower in terms of relaxation of measures in some of these European countries, which have seen an increase and appear to now be also seeing a decrease, but that's very early. So we'll have to keep monitoring. So the best guess of the folks at the Ontario Science Table is some moderate level of increase over the next few weeks, but not to the same level as we saw at the peak of Omicron, but still, think it would be most prudent to just take things gradually.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my second question really builds off part of what you said earlier and your response, and it really has to do with booster 2. Older adults have had booster 2. We know that with time, our booster 1 will wane. And we are seeing some people. I mean, I heard today that the president's press spokesperson has gotten her second round from last fall and now, and I know of at least one case locally, same kind of scenario where they had it last fall and have gotten it again now. And so I'm just wondering, is there any thinking yet in terms of at what point will the second booster go beyond the initial group, which is sort of high risk and those in congregate care settings?
Thanks again for that question, Councillor Urbanovic. So the fourth dose for the most vulnerable, such as residents in the congregate care settings, was actually really a booster to what is considered a 3-dose series or primary series for them. So it is felt that those populations require 3 doses as opposed to most of us who require just 2 to mount a very strong initial response. And so because of that, they did get a 4th dose recommendation, which serves as their booster. In terms of whether that booster recommendation, so a 4th dose or a second booster for most other people, including most adults, that is something that right now is being actively looked at by federal and provincial expert immunization committees to determine whether they feel, this is something that should be recommended and when. Okay. So I'm not hearing anything in the short term. There may be perhaps a recommendation before the next winter respiratory season, for example. But as we've seen throughout the pandemic, things could change. And so we'll just have to keep monitoring, and I'll keep council posted. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz, your hand was up. Did you change your mind or it's not up? Okay. Councillor McGarry?
Thank you. Just a point of clarification through you, Madam Chair, to Dr. Wong. In looking at what might be coming, in looking at other waves potentially, are you going to be continuing to use the wastewater signs and data in order to kind of track what's?
Yes. That collaboration with the University of Waterloo is continuing, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jowett, your hand was up and it's down. Do you have a question or a comment?
I apologize. It was asked and answered, so I won't waste anyone's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see no other questions or comments. So Dr. Wong and David, as always, thank you so much for keeping us up to date and for all the work. And I know that you two represent very strong teams, so thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you want to leave, we will forgive you. There are no petitions. We'll now proceed with delegations as listed on the agenda. I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you are called on to speak. Today's delegations will be allotted 5 minutes to speak. Groups of 2 or more will be allocated 10 minutes. Any delegations who registered after the deadline will be allotted 3 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You're then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations; derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others; turning your camera on at inappropriate times; and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations: please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is Council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from community members. Our first delegation is Jesse Burt, Sara Escobar, and Michael Parkinson, Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council Drug Action Team. So welcome, Jesse, Sara, and Michael. You have 10 minutes.
Good evening, Chair Redmond and members of Regional Council. As co-chair of the Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention Committee that considers upstream solutions to the worst drug poisoning crisis in Canadian history, we thank you for the opportunity. The WRPC is a community-led advisory committee to Regional Council, and in that capacity, and by motion of the council membership, select members of the committee are pleased to share key findings from the Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention Report. In the fall of 2021, following another disastrous year of unprevented drug poisoning deaths and injuries, the Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention membership requested a report on drug policy options. Waterloo Region ended 2021 with 158 drug poisoning deaths. A central consideration of this committee was reducing drug poisoning emergencies. The subcommittee was comprised of council members and people with direct service experience working in community agencies. The committee considers the available evidence, including local research shared with Regional Council over many years. We drew on the wisdom of communities near and far. We are guided by an authentic focus of equity. The second slide. The committee and council recommends legalization with strict regulations of currently illegal drugs as the best option for taxpayers, offering the best health and safety benefits for both individuals and communities. No other policy option will reduce drug poisoning deaths and injuries, which in Waterloo Region in 2021 exceeded deaths due to COVID-19. In January 2022, the number of drug poisoning deaths in Waterloo Region was about equal to the number of deaths of our local roadways for all of 2021. Regional Council will be aware of Waterloo Regional Crime Prevention Council unsafe research that demonstrated criminalization impairs honest relationships and hurts other efforts to get better. We're hoping that you are brave enough to hear the proposed and recommended changes tonight to those policies. They're policies that will validate the difficult work that is being undertaken as we speak on our streets and our communities. It will also validate the lives of those folks that are currently desperately needing and begging for their lives at this point, needing changes. And council and these policy changes are really the way to go. With that in mind, I turn it over to Michael and Jesse.
Thank you, Sara, and members of council. I'm at the Crime Prevention Council office with Jesse in the next room here, and my role is just to provide a little bit of context for the report, for your information. But if you're super interested, you can go to the council website. There's been a ton of webinars and related work done recently. You will know that Waterloo Region has a long history of with prohibition, in particular around alcohol. Bottom left there, you'll see that's across from today's Hoother Hotel, and the Bronfman Empire was really built on the backs of prohibition when it was, loaded onto trains in downtown and then shipped to the Detroit River and sold to Al Capone and that kind of thing. And the flavor of the times at the turn of the century up and through the 20s was really one of and I quote here, keeping our good girls good. I think that was the phrase that was in use at the time. And of course, related to alcohol, our Indigenous neighbors before and since alcohol prohibition in Canada have been disproportionately impacted through the Indian Act and other notions. And it wasn't just notions of immorality. It was very much a result of straight up racism. The Opium Act of 1908 in particular targeted Asians out west And again, the same phrase, keeping our good girls good. And predominantly that meant white Christian girls, of course. And we had a local MP here, W.G. Weigel, who 98 years ago said that prohibition of alcohol had been a failure. Instead of reducing crime, it had increased crime, and that emotional legislation, and I quote here, should never be placed on the statute books of any country. Sentiment should never take the place of intellect. It is not productive of good results. And you skip forward 98 years to January of this year, and Dr. Lisa Lapointe, who's the chief coroner out in British Columbia, states what many of our colleagues have suggested for years, that drug policy does more harm than good, and that much of the overdose poisoning crisis and other issues of health and safety that affect individuals and communities are the result of antiquated drug policy laws first crafted, more than 114 years ago. And we've seen this kind of flavor pop up from time to time. In 1970, it was the Legalization Commission, a federal commission that recommended the legalization and regulation of all substances. We've seen organizations like the Canadian Public Health Association, the Medical Health Officers of British Columbia, et cetera, come out with similar statements, similar reports over many years. The Crime Prevention Council just happens to be the latest. And just to provide a little bit of context here, you're looking at a graph. I've shown this to Regional Council before in 2018 when the council made recommendations for prevention in light of cannabis legalization and regulation. On the left side, you see health and social problems. You don't want to be near the top, but that's where we are. And on the bottom, different kind of regulatory approaches. The sweet spot is really in the middle. And if you think about alcohol, pharmaceutically, it's an inherently dangerous drug. But like our experience with alcohol prohibition, there would be more harms generated if it were made illegal. And cannabis, of course, is the recent experience here in Canada, and it's moving toward the center of that graph. And that's really where you want to be. This is adapted from John Marks, an economist by permission. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jesse. He'll walk you through some of the indicators that the committee came up with and evaluated. And what we were evaluating was prohibition, decriminalization, and legalization. Prohibition, you're familiar with. Decriminalization is a little bit more murky. There are different versions out there. Some from more the enforcement justice side would have police as gatekeepers, on whether to lay charges, whether they would be criminal or administrative, and those kinds of things. There are issues of thresholds, like how much fentanyl can you carry on you before you are sanctioned, either criminally or administratively. So that's why we've broken up decriminalization. And then, of course, legalization with strict regulation. We know that through alcohol and cannabis more recently. So that's what we evaluated, and Jesse will quickly walk you through where we landed.
Thanks, Michael. So first off, we really want to look at where do unregulated drugs come from currently. And under our current prohibition model, we have organized crimes such as gangs and cartels that control the manufacturing and distribution of unregulated drug supply. So organized crime should be best understood as businesses simply meeting a demand. It's estimated that the global economy of unregulated drugs is more than $900 billion. If we move into a strict legal regulation approach, we will, like we already have with alcohol and cannabis, we can see sort of improvements in safety and potential tax revenue. Next is quality control. The reason that we call it an unregulated market is because there is no quality control standards applied to the manufacturing and distribution of drugs. The harsher we try to crack down and criminalize the supply, the more incentives organized crime have to smuggle in smaller, more concentrated, potent versions of a drug. That is why we've seen the likes of fentanyl replace heroin in the unregulated market. When drugs are moved across borders, they start off small, but they end up getting cut with lots of different drugs and fillers, really to maximize profit. This in turn creates these cocktail drugs that are super dangerous because the ingredients and the strength are totally unknown to the end consumer. This is why we call it a poisoning crisis. Most overdose deaths are not intentional. People are dying from drugs. People are not dying from drugs. They're dying from unregulated toxic drugs. Despite popular belief, you can actually live a long and healthy life taking drugs, such as heroin, on a daily basis, as long as the consumer knows the composition and strength, aka a safe supply. Decriminalization will not replace the toxic, unregulated drug supply. Therefore, we will continue to see organized crime and record high overdose deaths. For individual level impacts, the fear of criminalization and needing to rely on the unregulated market creates isolation, unhealthy relationship ties, and vulnerability, which all lead to high levels of victimization that don't get ever reported to the police. Legal regulation approach removes some of these barriers to seeking connection, supports, and treatment. People no longer view themselves as a criminal who buys illegal drugs, but perhaps as someone with a health condition that just needs their daily medication. It's a total change in worldview, enabling control and self-worth again. Next, we have opportunities. When we punish substance use, we create cycles of poverty. In the community, criminal records create unemployment, which we know severely limits people's future opportunities for stable housing, education, and healthy relationships. Compare all that to places like Switzerland that have taken a legal regulation approach to substance use. They not only provide a safe supply and housing, they actually go as far as offering businesses hiring incentives for people on heroin-assisted treatment, with a majority of people on these drug programs engaging in meaningful employment while using heroin on a daily basis. So for eligibility, right now, when we hear the word legalization, honestly, it sounds super scary. We're supposed to picture anarchy and chaos. But what I'm trying to argue is that right now, that's what we have. We have chaos. We have unknown criminal organizations selling unknown drugs to unknown people, all unrestricted, all done in the dark because of our criminal approach. Despite the best efforts of police, unregulated drugs are highly accessible, easy to obtain, and widespread. Anyone right now can access the unregulated market, any age or any health condition. Decriminalization wouldn't change eligibility. Only by moving into strict legal regulation could you control the consumer qualifications, just like we do for prescriptions or under-the-counter medications or age limits for dispensaries. In terms of enforcement, the war on drugs is very expensive and ineffective.
Jesse,
for instance,
you drew the tough spot being cleanup, so you're out of time, but I'll allow you to finish up, okay?
Yeah, finish up. Yeah, I'll do one more indicator. So in terms of the war on drugs, for example, the FDA in the United States spends about $30 billion a year focused on stopping the supply, but it's actually estimated that they only stop about 1% of the total supply each year. So we're really fixated on this idea that we can somehow stop the supply, when in reality, it's impossible. So like in Waterloo region, whenever there's $1 million drug bust, no one notices a decrease in supply. Nothing changes. And that really just, again, speaks to how big the drug economy is. The war on drugs has led to mass incarceration that disproportionately harms people without housing, low income, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and people with mental health challenges. So for instance, in Canada, like we have about 70 to 80% of people incarcerated have cited that substance use was a key contributor to their incarceration. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is are individuals coming out of prison in better shape than they went in? And from local research that we've done with Crime Prevention Council, we found that people were in and out of jail an average of 12 times, yet they are still using substances. And so I'll wrap it up there, but yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. And you have questions, so I'm sure some of the points that you want to make can come out in the dialogue as well.
Of course.
Councillor Jowett, go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. So I think this is probably a good time to ask this, and I think it may have been asked in the past, but I still think it's an important one. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the concept of chasing the dragon. And Michael, I know you and I have had many conversations about this. And so what I'm asking here is, are we going to be producing a replica of Chasing the Dragon where people are coming close to that point of losing their lives, that is the thrill that is sought after? Because I worry about that. So I'm trying to understand, what exactly are we producing? And then the next question, which might be kind of complex, is there's always going to be crime out there and the criminal element trying to make a revenue in these kinds of ways. And so I worry that there may be the targeting of our children, younger and younger kids with these drugs. So I think these are concerns that a lot of people might have, and they probably sound, kind of simple to you guys that we would have these concerns, but I really do think we need to kind of understand the impact on citizens of our community. So what kind of way would you respond to that or those questions?
So who would like to go first? Michael, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. And you kind of cut out of me a little bit there, Councillor Jowett, but here goes. With a legalized, regulated approach, what you have are, and that doesn't exist right now, are those core consumer health and safety standards that are applied to other foods, other drugs, other consumer products right across Canada. In the same way that, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency monitors food for contamination, and if it's contaminated, it's pulled from the shelves and replaced with a safer supply. That does not exist now, and so you would have that kind of mechanism in place. You would have mechanisms that would prevent selling to children and that kind of thing. So we've had some experience with cannabis, and what it has done, I think it's mixed results in the early days about whether it's increased use or not increased use. It's still early days. What it has done is undercut the criminal market, for one. Two, it has stopped disproportionately incarcerating people who are Indigenous, Black, or people of color. And third, it has allowed for public, the application of core public health principles to be applied to a cannabis market that overnight went from illegal to legal. Enables conversations around prevention, around education, and that kind of thing. So those are sort of the general benefits of legalizing and regulating, and you get away from a prohibition or this thing called decriminalization model. And whether organized crime moves into other revenue generating opportunities, I can't say. I think they might be motivated to, but what they will not be doing is involved in supplying the drugs that kill, that killed 4,000 people in Ontario last year. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. That's 8 times the number of people who died on roadways in Ontario by comparison. It's anyway, I could go on and on. The data is depressing. It continues to go the wrong way. So whether it's targeted to children or not, as Jesse sort of mentioned, there are no rules now. Anyone of any age can buy those currently unregulated drugs. We would expect to see age restrictions in place. And, ideally, in following sort of that Portuguese model and following all the evidence from the Crime Prevention Council around upstream prevention, the sweet spot would be to engage in authentic upstream prevention efforts in neighborhoods that we know prevent the demand for substance use. In this regulatory model, we're really looking at supply. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope I'm close.
Jesse, did you want to weigh in?
Crystal ball, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Michael. They were very interesting comments for sure. We have some work ahead of us, but I appreciate your comments.
Jesse, did you want to respond to that, or did Michael pretty much cover it?
I think Michael covered it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Great presentation, and I had the opportunity to read the submission that was in our package as well, and fantastic job there too. I agree with every single thing you said, and I think I can speak for some other members of council at least who would feel the same way. I have 2 questions, and one is a highly technical one, and the other one is a sort of more general one. As I know, criminalization would be a federal matter, and some of your requests, your recommendations in your report also speak about funding of urgent public health sites, funding of the infrastructure that would allow safe inhalation. I guess my general question is, what would you like from the region? What do you see the regional council's role here? And one question, and I don't know who that's for, what is involved in the machinery that allows a safe inhalation site? I know I know the reasons that consumption and treatment sites have typically not allowed them, and that has to do with, you know, workplace safety and things like that. But I know that there's a way to do it, and I'm just wondering whether you can share some information around that, the costs and the actual mechanics of that.
Okay, Michael, do you want to start?
Yep, I can start. So I think Councillor Clark is referring to a letter. I haven't seen your agenda package. I didn't see the letter in the original one. So deal with those separately. So the letter makes a request. It's following on a motion from Crime Prevention Council to one part of it deals with provision of inhalation services at supervised consumption sites. And the reason for that is most people, and not just recently, are dying from inhaling substances, not from injecting. It's been a number one modality for some time. So that's the rationale. Those people are currently excluded. In terms of the technicalities of it, ventilation systems exist. I mean, I have the schematics for the Lethbridge site sitting in my computer somewhere. It cost them about 150 grand to establish. We had a member of our community go visit Saskatchewan last week, and she saw the inhalation services there. And I think it cost a little bit less in that scenario. So the technology exists, and whether the money and the will at other levels of government exists, I can't say for sure, but we're certainly missing out on the opportunity that way. And then, you know, we had we had an example at the front end of the pandemic where it was a pandemic response to people lacking stable housing, and most of those folks were using substances. The way staff were able to accommodate people in that environment was to establish an outdoor area where people could inhale their substances, and it worked. It cleared up the washrooms, for example, and people weren't smoking their drugs inside. So let's not overthink it, right? I mean, a supervised consumption site, it's a table, chair, it's a set of eyes, and the letter, I think, mentions urgent public health need sites. That's been available locally and across Canada for almost 2 years now. It's a much reduced process, and of course there's lots of support. Downside, no funding on the table. So I hope that answers your, did I get your question, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, just...
Oh, and the role for council, right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the Crime Prevention Council, I mean, on the report, they asked the committee to develop a report, and they have endorsed the report, the membership there, and they have asked us to share the report. And so that's what we were doing. We did a webinar last week, and what the recommendations is in the report, part of it urges the Government of Canada, and I quote here, to expedite an inclusive consultation process in 2022 to collaboratively inform a new legal framework that is grounded in equity, evidence, and the wisdom of people most affected by drug-related issues. So it's entirely up to Regional Council whether you would like to endorse that part of the report and forward it on to area MPs and MPPs and other stakeholders. That's what the Crime Prevention Council has done. We realize this is squarely federal jurisdiction here, but that's your prerogative if that's the route you decide to go. And then, you know, to continue to be advocates, I think in the worlds that you walk in is always helpful. I'm reminded of the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion that was endorsed by the WHO and locally by Public Health back in the day. I'm dating myself here, but advocacy was always a key part of the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion, and that includes all of us on the Zoom call today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Clark.
No, I'm just thank you again for the presentation.
Sara, I saw you nodding really vigorously. Is there anything you want to add to what Michael's already shared?
I'm okay right now. Michael covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor McGarry.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And I just wanted to thank Sara and Jesse and Michael for the incredible work that they've been doing. Our community is much better off. It must not feel like it as the tsunami rolls over us with so many opioid poisonings. But I know without the work that you've done over many years now, we'd be looking at a far worse scenario. Part of my question was really asked through Councillor Clark, and that was about the way of ingesting the opioids. And a surprise to me as to how much people were actually smoking rather than injecting it. And I understand that there's, potential models of which, an indoor, an outside smoking hut or something that might work. In any given community that sees more smoking of this stuff rather than injectable, does it sort of cut down on some of the narrative, the negative narrative from near neighbors, because there might be potential needle litter? That's one question. And the other thing that I wanted to say is that over safer supply and the so the debate around that, I certainly take my cues from the Chief of Police, the National Chief of Police Association, that are advocating for a safer supply because it's just better on the community, and of course there's far less crime associated and better outcomes. So in light of all that, I'm just wondering about the community perception, as I said, and then I had one follow-up question as well.
So, Michael?
I'm not, to your first question, people, generally you don't, from a public health point of view, you don't want to see people injecting their substances. So yes, inhaling is dangerous. Yes, it's a leading modality of use on a provincial level, not just locally, in Ontario, in British Columbia. So those people are currently excluded from consumption sites where they exist. There's another impact here, and people working in the shelter system and other direct service capacities will know, and that is you want to have people using in a safer environment with a set of eyes, not in the bathroom stalls, not behind the building in a hedge, not behind 150 Main Street or wherever it may be. A, because there's no one there really to assist them, and B, because, and I think Mayor McGarry, you might even have personal experience at 150 Main, nobody wants to come across another victim on the brink of death or someone who has died. That is traumatizing, and it is unfair, I think, to those in direct service who have to deal with that kind of issue. So I know, at that pandemic era shelter that I spoke about, where a drug consumption was allowed, including inhalation, zero complaints from the neighbors about needle litter or other kinds of typical nuisance complaints. I don't think the neighbors knew the extent of the activity going on there. And so, and to your point around safe supply, yeah, it's a no-brainer, right? We didn't evaluate safe supply. It's more of a medical model. And you will know, as a member of Crime Prevention Council, that this tiny team was responsible for advocating for safe supply early on in 2017, 2018, and I've been part of a group to help bring millions of dollars for Safe Supply project north of the 401. I know that doesn't help out your community very much, but in the letter, you will see a call for expanded safe supply. In the in between, prohibition and any kind of movement that might happen at the federal level, safe supply is an imperfect, real opportunity for individual and community health and safety that exists in the interim. Where we lack funding, of course, where we lack capacity, and this program in north of the 401, we always knew we would never meet demand, and that's true. There are wait lists, and additional funding from Ontario health teams, for example, from the federal government would be more than welcome. And then the federal funding here runs out in about 1 year and 8 days. So there's a real question of what will happen after that. And I have no doubt that the evaluation here will produce the kind of positive impacts that we said would happen 4 years ago: reduced crime, reduced disorder, reduced overdoses, reduced HIV, hepatitis C infections, reduced homelessness, et cetera, all benefiting the taxpayer and all in the interest of improved health and safety. So yeah, whatever you can do to continue to advocate to other orders of government, other funding entities to bring Safe Supply on would be great. I don't know if Jesse or Sarah had anything to add.
Jesse?
Yeah, sure, I'll go. Michael, you're right on though. I would say, sort of combined in Mary, what you said, and Councillor Clark, sort of what could we do as a region in the interim, because we know this is something we're gonna have to keep advocating and pushing the federal government on. We can start to do things here locally that would have somewhat of a significant impact. I don't know. I just spent today and yesterday morning with some people because we just had a few more deaths in the community, and I spent, I think, a little bit too much of my time doing sort of grieving with people and knowing that there's a huge wait list for and I know individuals who are on the Safer Supply program right now, and it's doing wonders for them. And so the need is so great, and so if we can, I'm always going to pitch for more funding for Safer Supply. So if that's something that we can reallocate sort of funds from, that'd be amazing, because we know that it's not. I know this is more medical, and that's kind of something that the region kind of steers a little bit away from. But if we tackle homelessness this way, or if we tackle crime this way, I know that we could find a few dollars to sort of stabilize people. These are. Like Sarah and I will always say, this is insanely complex. I cannot, it's hard for me to blow through all this whole presentation in less than 5 minutes and do it justice. Sort of the complexities that we see on the streets, we can't understate how this impacts people, how criminalizing this issue is really, really impacting people, and how we can do it a lot better. But yeah, that's all I would say.
So Sarah,
Thank you. Could I have a follow-up?
You can.
Oops,
Sarah, I feel like I'm picking on you. Do you want to join in? If you want, feel free.
I'm enjoying listening to the questions right now, so I wouldn't mind just keep on listening, and I promise I'll jump in.
Okay.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Councillor McGarry.
Yeah, I've never known Sarah to be necessarily shy and retiring, that's for sure. My follow-up would be some of the issues then around community perception. I know that I've been talking about, and many of us have received a mailer in our mailboxes yesterday that is really stigmatizing the drug use, and the wording on the back: do we need taxpayer-funded opioids and stimulants, and a drug consumption site, and a QR code that allows you to develop into, or to actually get onto a survey. But in that mailer, it mentions the fact that the mayor of Cambridge was speaking about safer supply. It didn't identify the term safer supply, and that this was a severe pushback. So what worries me is the public perception. It worries me that people don't really understand the complexity and couldn't possibly about drug use. But here we have a potential program that makes better outcomes. It's better for the community on all the things that you talked about, the decreased demand and calls for services for, everyone that's involved in overdoses. But how can we sort of, counteract some of this incredible misinformation that's now in everybody's homes in the Cambridge and North Dumfries riding? How do we even go forward with trying to mitigate some of the harmful issues out there? It's, to me, this mailer is weaponizing harm reduction, and harm reduction is what we're trying to do. It not only saves lives, but better outcomes for the community. So do you have any thoughts on how we can counteract, except a statement which I've already put out?
I can go, Michael, or
Go ahead,
sorry, through you, Chair Redmond.
Yep.
I had a few people call me yesterday, sort of very upset by the pamphlet that they received with that misinformation. My instant thought kind of did go towards the families who who had recently lost their loved ones to overdose, and how devastating that would be to receive that news that day and to receive a pamphlet the same day, sort of with this misinformation on it. It's deeply concerning. I would say, like, it's really frustrating though, also because of the just handing at the taxpayer, sort of simplifying this issue, and in reality, like, again, if we were to think about sort of the amount of money that we are pouring into sort of currently trying to stop the supply and how ineffective that is, we could be saving a lot of money, and the safe supply would save a lot of money. Like, you, again, not just EMS calls to overdoses, but the rate of hospitalizations, I think it's number 4 in Canada right now, is substance use, for hospital stays, and the rate of mental health and wellness checks, and unnecessary incarceration, the cost of homelessness, and all of these things. It's really disconcerting, especially around election time, and it's a sort of a way to get votes, and it's hard. I don't know how else to say it, but it is misinformation, and and it's quite leading. some of the survey questions. I don't know how to but to answer your question, how to combat it, I look to. I think everyone has a voice. Everyone has power. Everyone can be an advocate. If we're willing to just be brave enough to share sort of what's happening to people on the ground. But I don't know. I don't think there's an easy answer.
Thank you for that, Jesse. Sara, you've unmuted. Are you going to jump in?
If that's okay with you.
Yep.
So I'm gonna answer this probably with a reply that may be confusing and may not be popular and have some questions. I'm gonna answer it with the word love. That's how I want to reply to things like this, to instances where people are clearly and knowingly giving out misinformation. My question is why, and why with love and care. My natural assumption at this point, and I hate to make assumptions, but my natural assumption at this point leads me to believe, because of my experience up till now, leads me to believe that it's pain. The reason why the reason why folks have a hard time understanding the impact that a policy change like this one can have is maybe it's because they've suffered some serious pain themselves. And if you've suffered pain at the hands of a loved one in your family that has stolen, that has damaged property, that has lied and has betrayed you and hasn't loved you back, that's serious, deep, wounded pain. And I think that sometimes blocks us from being able to consider larger things. And so I would like to be able to respond to people like this. I would like to be able to invite them to a conversation, ask whatever questions you have. I think one of the things that, and I know, and we've said this before in other presentations, where I think that one of the mistakes we've made in the past as service providers has been assuming that people didn't care, assuming that it was too complex and that we were not going to be able to get you to understand what actually was occurring. And so we tried to simplify things. And then when we were met with anger and frustration and lack of understanding, we became angry and frustrated ourselves, because what we were watching is what we're continuing now to watch is people dying and preventable deaths. And so we responded with anger and frustration and lack of patience. And now I want to go back and I want to be able to offer time and patience and love to be able to reply to all these questions, to be able to have answer or have the time to have conversations. We may not come up with an answer that we all like, but we might discover some new things through those conversations, and maybe some new humanity within us and new connections between us that could lead us to a different understanding and different ways of being able to imagine what our forward would look like.
Sara, thank you for that. I just want to caution Council that we have 2 other delegations who are still waiting. So I'm now going to go to Councillor Kiefer. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Sara, Jesse, and Michael. And my question is simple, or I've got a couple of questions. Michael, have you had an opportunity to? You have an excellent presentation here. It's really, really good. And have you had an opportunity to present this to the local MPs and MPPs in our area? I'm curious to know if you've had that opportunity and what the reaction was. And the second question I have is, I know you've appeared in with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and AMO speaking as well, because being a former member of the FCM, I knew you were there a few times. So anyways, I'd like to know if you've had those opportunities or not, and the reaction.
Michael?
Thank you, Councillor Kiefer. No, we have not. And because this office is closing and my position ends in 7 days, this is the report and the sharing of the report is all sort of at the closing end of the time of the Crime Prevention Council. So the report has been forwarded on to area MPs and MPPs. There are some bills before the House of Commons current bill C-214 or 260, I can't remember. Gordon John's bill calls for decriminalization. We've had some discussions with area federal MPs about that, but nothing different on this report. So we'll do what we can. This is really the last time that we'll share, and we've mailed out the report, and it's in the hands of communities and elected officials from here on in. Yeah.
Councillor Kiefer?
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Foxton, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Sara, Michael, and Jesse, thank you for your passion and caring. I just want to speak about the pamphlet that Mayor McGarry was talking about shortly a while ago. And Canada North Dumfries Ontario Health Team did a response, which a lot of the municipalities have Facebooked and tweeted out, and the public. Now I see tonight that Cambridge Memorial Hospital has also taken a response to this. So you're gaining momentum, and maybe it was a good thing. Maybe it opened our eyes to see and look at the situation and listen to a lot of respected professionals. So maybe it was a positive thing. This was a political game. I'm sorry politics has to play such a terrible role in a time when you people are trying to do good work, but we all are. But it is an election year, and a lot of crap's going to go around. But good, stable, honest people who speak up the truth, I hope will always prevail. So thank you for what you do, and understand you have a massive amount of groups of people behind you that see the truth.
Thank you, Councillor Fox and Councillor Clark. I'm going to go to Councillor Erb and then Verbanovich and then back to you because you've already spoken. So Councillor Erb, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Michael and Jesse and Sara for the presentation tonight. You have every reason to feel overwhelmed that this is such a significant issue that's in our region and sweeping all across our country, unfortunately. And so thank you for the work that you're doing, your colleagues. I know there's many times that you're traumatized by what you see and what you have to do on a daily basis, so thank you. I hope the region can support you in all of your asks, that we can effectively advocate for you at both the provincial and the federal level. We need to do everything to remove the punishment of this and take it towards medical care and removing the stigma. And so whatever we can do to support you, I would encourage my colleagues to do, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Erb. Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and I too want to thank you, Michael, Jesse, and Sara for being here tonight and for the report that you've brought forward. I think as we've all recognized previously, this is a crisis in our community and quite frankly a crisis across our country in terms of the challenges that we're dealing with. We're seeing other jurisdictions where the approach they take is, simply just keep filling the jails and try to deal with it that way, and we know that doesn't work. And I think speaking to what Councillor Erb was just talking about, the whole notion of starting to see this as a legitimate medical issue, and removing that stigma is absolutely critical. And if one needs to hope that day that we're moving a step closer towards that day, I think one just needs to look at the work that's been done over the years and the progress that we've made in areas such as mental health, where, while not totally removed yet, certainly we've made a lot of progress from a stigma point of view. And I think the work that you folks have done over the years, and the work that we've done through things like the CTS site, which has proved to be a success, and so on, will only serve as evidence that this is the direction that we need to go, and we need to work with our government partners in order to see that happen, so that we can get folks what they need to get to a point where they can choose to move their lives away from drugs over time, and to lead meaningful lives going forward. I just want to briefly touch on the regretful piece of literature that has been referenced earlier this evening as well. I find it in today's day and age absolutely repulsive, quite frankly, that kind of literature is making its way from a person in a position of authority. I mean, we're seeing what misinformation is doing, quite frankly, around the world, including, sadly, right now in places like Ukraine, in terms of what countries like Russia are doing. And we cannot have that happen here, and we have to call it out for what it is. So I'm glad it got raised tonight, and it is sad that, as I think it was you, Sara, who referenced it, that there were folks who, sadly, on a day when maybe they were learning the fate of a family member, were also getting this in their mailbox. It's just mind-blowing. So thank you again to all of you, and certainly we'll, through our continued work in FCM and with our federal and provincial government partners, work to move this important piece of work forward.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to recognize Councillor Galloway and Clark, and then I'm going to ask that we move on because we do have other delegations waiting. So Councillor Galloway, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to add my thanks to Sara, Jesse, and Michael for the report on behalf of the drug action team from the Crime Prevention Council. A week or so ago, when we had what was thought to be at least the last meeting of the Crime Prevention Council, we were asked to reminisce a little bit about some of our memories of the Crime Prevention Council. And I brought up the integrated drug strategy as one of the highlights. And here we see again today another piece of that mosaic of the integrated drug strategy, and the harm reduction piece. It's very, very important. I'm so very proud of the Crime Prevention Council and this council for being progressive in terms of the harm reduction piece. It's not easy, and I am very very upset about the piece of literature that came out. It's very despicable, and very politically opportune, and all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's really just noise, and it's really just a distraction. The way is fairly clear. And this council has been, I think, been very progressive in that regard in terms of the harm reduction piece. The consumption sites, the one that we have and the one that we're planning for, and the safe supply, and now the decriminalization, as well as a few other things, including inhalation services. It's all about working with those people who are on their life journey in drugs, and keeping them healthy and keeping them as alive. As Michael indicated, we've had more deaths in our community by drug overdose than we have had by COVID. Who would understand that? We've read about COVID every day for the last 2 years, but have we read about drug overdoses and the deaths associated with drug overdoses every day for the last 2 years? But yet there's more deaths associated with drug overdoses. And so the harm reduction piece is really, really, really important. And I fully support the recommendations coming from the Drug Action Team, as represented here by Sara, Jesse, and Michael, and applaud that group and this group that's here today delegating for this work. It's really all about trying to keep the people in their life journey who are associated with drugs as healthy as possible until such time as they are ready to make hopefully a major change in their life towards a healthier lifestyle. And criminalization does not contribute to that. Unsafe supply does not contribute to that. And the use of drugs in unsafe circumstances, in back alleys and in bedrooms, does not contribute to that. It's those kinds of things that we've already put in place, and now this opportunity we have as well that puts into place those kinds of harm reduction practices that can really assist the long-term, potentially rehabilitation of the people that are involved in drugs in their life. And it's the harm reduction piece that a lot of people don't understand, and some people take great political opportunity with. And it's despicable that people take great political opportunity with this when the reason is so clear about the efficacy of this kind of work and these kinds of initiatives in preventing overdose deaths, as well as improving the quality of life for so many people. So I fully support the work and thank the group, the Drug Action Team, for the great work that they've done on this report as well as in the past.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Councillor Clark, last word, and then we will move on to our other delegations.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really a question for the delegations. It's really a question for you, I believe. I'm wondering whether this would be the appropriate time to bring a notice of motion. I don't know whether the best approach would be to endorse the report that the committee has written, or whether there's some other way we can better support this work in communicating with the federal government and our partners. And I'd like a chance to speak with staff first about that, but with the intention of bringing a notice to our next council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Looking for staff input, I think a notice of motion would be appropriate. So we'll take this as a notice of motion, and when we broach this subject in the future, staff will have some input, which is, I believe, what you're requesting, right? Councillor Vanovich, are you seconding that?
Yeah, no, I'll happily second it, but just, I mean, can we not just give direction to staff to go back and bring sort of, recommendations to go with Councillor Clark's motion, bring them back to us for the next council meeting potentially?
Sure. How about we are saying we endorse this report in principle and ask for staff to bring a report back to our next council meeting? I don't see anyone who's objecting to that, so that will be the way forward. So again, Jesse, Sara, and Michael, thank you very much. Our next delegation is Fauzia Mazhar, Executive Director, Coalition of Muslim Women. Welcome, Fauzia. You have the floor, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you for being so patient.
No problem. It's a very important conversation. I learned a lot. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and good evening, Chair Redmond and members of the Regional Council. I'm here today to thank the regional staff for their interest in and the dedication to preparing the recommendations that the Council has today on the agenda. These recommendations have been prepared for the Council in full collaboration with the Coalition of Muslim Women of KW. Today, this Council has the to support the eradication of Islamophobia from Waterloo region in some tangible and meaningful ways. Islamophobia manifests itself in acts of violence, discrimination, and exclusion for people of Muslim faith, but also for those who could be perceived as Muslims. It is not only the prejudices about the faith itself that perpetuates Islamophobia. It's also about the color of the skin of the victims, and it's also about their othering as immigrants. Islamophobia happens at the intersection of racism, xenophobia, and anti-Islam, anti-Muslim biases and prejudices. Acts of violence, discrimination, and exclusion motivated by Islamophobia disproportionately target women who can be identified or perceived as Muslim women. Gendered Islamophobia is the term to describe this particular form of violence against women. Gendered Islamophobia manifests itself at the state level in the form of legislations, policies, and practices that exclude Muslim women from full participation in economic and social spheres based on their clothing choices. Gendered Islamophobia at the street level is manifested as the interpersonal acts of violence and humiliation that target Muslim women in public spaces. The more othered your looks are, the more you become the target. I know I don't have to tell you how real and alive racism and Islamophobia is in our community here in the region of Waterloo, in our nation, and in our world. It sets people back. It does not allow all of our citizens to thrive and reach their full potential. It affects the mental health, well-being, and sense of security for the members of Muslim community, particularly youth and women. Today, this council has an opportunity to put your individual and collective support towards some tangible and meaningful ways we can work together to prevent and address Islamophobia in our region. But that's not all. These recommendations, when approved and actioned, will also contribute to making our region a safer place for communities targeted for harm and violence beyond the Muslim community. So I strongly encourage you to have a unanimous voice to support the staff report and the recommended motion to address Islamophobia that you have on the agenda today. Your time.
Thank you so much, Fauzia, and thank you for coming and adding your voice and your leadership from the community for this. Colleagues, we have one more delegation, and I know that our Fauzia Beg has lit up her Hollywood Square, so I'm going to ask for indulgence. Listen to the next delegation, and then we will go right to the report that Fauzia Mazhar referenced. So Nina Deeb from Kitchener. Nina, if you are here, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead with your presentation. Oh. Nina, are you with us? Okay, we're not seeing Nina. We obviously do have her presentation. I'm going to ask staff to take it down.
Hello?
Oh, you're
Hello?
here? Okay, go ahead, Nina.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is my presentation on the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force. If we can you hear me? Sorry, I'm having something here.
Nina,
yes.
we can hear you and see you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the first note here, so I've got the recommendations, what they have, and then what my recommendations are. So the first note here, the 1.5 million new homes in 10 years. So that is about double the historical units. The change here is actually the difference is that the province now permits secondary suites, adding another housing units. The taxpayers are paying for this, not the region or the province. So if this is a goal that is managed, I added a secondary suite to my home. I paid for it. And then MPAC came and taxed me right away. They came and reassessed my property. They increased my taxes for adding the secondary suite. So the second thing I see here is amending the Plan Act, limiting exclusionary zoning. I'm pretty much against everything that I see here. I see everything being shifted to the taxpayer, what they're asking for here. These are all just shift to the taxpayer, right down to number 7, number 8, as of right zoning, number 10 doesn't even qualify. We're not in Toronto. So Waterloo region not being in Toronto, parking requirements should be abolished. We'll move on to the next page, please. I'm against everything that I see here. Some of these recommendations really raise questions, very questionable and bizarre recommendations. I don't see that local interests are being represented here. Preventing abuse of the heritage preservation and designation process, number 16. Prohibiting reactive heritage designations after a Plan Act development application. These are the local decisions, and I find these recommendations very bizarre. Let's move to the next page, please. It's number 17, requiring municipalities to compensate property owners for loss of property value. I can't even wrap my mind around this. Like, this is the taxpayers' money. So the province has come now and this idea of compensating property owners for, I don't understand this strategy at all. Inefficiencies of the appeal process, this is correct. We should abolish all tribunals. The funding and creation of the approvals facilitator with the authority to resolve conflicts between the municipality and the province. Again, like I don't understand what this gloves coming at our municipality is about. I don't think they know anything about our housing to be coming and putting their fingers in our business here. The red tape needs to be rolled back to 1967. I did notice they made in there on page 16. That in 1966, how easy it was to build things. This is true. I agree that we should go back to 1967. We have way too much red tape in the way. Allowing wood construction. Will it be Canadian wood? Because we've been using Brazilian wood during COVID, which is like sand to the desert. That's a question I have here. That's not really... And the other issue, number 26, the issue of the tribunals and the tribunal relying on evidence. Well, there's a contradiction. Tribunals do not rely on evidence. So I guess evidence can be used when they want it for their purpose or when they don't want it for their purpose. Tribunals don't rely on evidence. Let's go to the next, please. Prevent abuse of process. No kidding. I agree with this. Tribunals are not the forum for housing. We should be using courts. $10,000 filing fee for third-party appeals, a raise from $400. Indeed. What's this about? Who does this benefit? I'm not sure, but they're very questionable recommendations, encouraging greater use of oral decisions to allow the tribunal to award punitive damages. The existing backlog, number 31, yes, there's if you follow Tribunal Watch, there's good reason for this. So if you don't appoint adjudicators, you're probably going to have a backlog. So we should start with appointing adjudicators. If we appoint adjudicators and don't leave positions vacant, that will definitely help with that. We can move on to the next page, please. Waiving development fees, waiving cash in lieu of, waiving, prohibiting interest rates on development charges. I don't know who's this is all going to benefit. It's not benefiting us. Prohibiting interest rates on development charges, none of their business. Regarding cash in lieu of parkland and these charges, the provincial review of reserve funds. You know, I'm going to mention something here. This number 35 here of not allowing further collection and aligning property taxes, moving our clawbacks. So one thing I'd like to mention here, that Ontario in the late 1990s was the only province to download housing responsibility to municipalities. What they didn't download was the money. So they kept the land transfer tax, kept the capital gains tax, kept the new homes sales tax, but they downloaded the responsibility they downloaded all housing responsibilities to the municipalities, and they were the only province to do that.
So Nina, I've tried to be a bit generous because you had a late start, but if you could wrap up, that would be great.
Yes, I'm gonna wrap this up. So one of the issues I have here is impact reassessing taxpayers when they add housing units, like I was. And also there was a comment about depoliticizing the housing process. I agree with this. When it comes to depoliticization, I think one of the things that shouldn't be done is a task force. When we're given appointments to a task force like this, the former PC leader shouldn't be on this task force. I think that there's lots of people in Ontario that could have been on this task force. There's 90,000 of us realtors. Maybe a realtor could have been asked to have been on this task force. I'm not sure, but I don't think the PC leader should have been on this task force. That's what I have to say.
Nina, thank you very much, and thank you for your analysis. I appreciate it, as does council. I see no questions, so again, thank you for coming in and sharing your views of the task force recommendations with us. Colleagues, I'm going to ask us now to turn to, it's actually under the Chief Administrative Officer report, it's 11.3, and it is the report on the Coalition of Muslim Women recommendations to counter Islamophobia. And I would invite Fauzia Beg to introduce the report. And I understand that I think Jenny Smith and Jeff Schelling are available for questions as well. So Fauzia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. So good evening, everyone. My name is Fauzia Beg, and I'm the Director for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the region of Waterloo. I'm here today to bring back a staff report to Council from February on the Coalition of Muslim Women's recommendations to Council around Islamophobia. The very fact that we are seeing this report again today is a testament to the reality of the reconciliation, equity, and diversity work, that it's not easy or straightforward, but rather work that takes intention, patience, compassion, and a willingness to take risks, to try new things, and to learn from our experiences, good or bad. For me, this work is not only professional, but it's personal. I'm in a position to impact this work, but I'm also greatly impacted by this work. Recent events continue to reinforce how important it is to acknowledge and track acts of hate, the impact on communities and families, and to find ways to act and counter these. The recommendations in this report reflect the region's commitment to eradicating a specific type of hate, Islamophobia. We recognize the importance of meaningful community engagement in building trust and relationships with community. We don't always get it right, but we are committed to continuing to do this and to learning in hopes that we do. In developing these recommendations, we engage with the Coalition of Muslim Women to better understand the next steps in this shared journey and feel we have reflected those conversations in this report. In this report, you will see actions related to developing a regional approach with area municipalities, dedicating training on anti-Islamophobia for regional staff, committing to annually recognizing this Green Square campaign, and the January 29th, the National Day of Remembrance of the Quebec City Mosque Action Against Islamophobia Day, providing the financial support needed for the Coalition of Muslim Women to sustain their hate or discrimination reporting and support program, also considering amendments to the Code of Conduct bylaw to address harassment based on race, religion, gender identity, or sexual orientation and other protected grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code. On the latter, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to speak a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Fauzia. Hello, my name is Jeff Schelling. I'm the Director of Legal Services here at the region. I'd like to start by thanking Fauzia and members of the Coalition of Muslim Women for inviting me to meet with them and hear their thoughts on ways in which municipal bylaw making authority could be considered to address not only Islamophobia, but other expressions of hatred and broader discrimination. As noted in the report, 2 Canadian municipalities, Edmonton and London, have already adopted or are considering amendments to existing bylaws that govern conduct on municipally owned public lands. These amendments would specifically address expressions of hatred and discrimination. Like most other municipalities, the region also has an existing Code of Conduct bylaw that applies to region-owned properties. The report before you recommends that staff engage with community stakeholders and area municipal staff, and also reach out to other municipalities to learn from their experience. Consider possible amendments to the region's bylaw. Such a review would entail a process of evaluation to determine whether amendments similar to those being considered or implemented in other communities, might be a useful tool, one that could fill a gap in the existing legal framework and have meaningful impact in addressing hatred and discrimination in our community. I look forward to working with Fauzia and others going forward.
Thanks, Jeff. We are working very intentionally and carefully to ensure the voice of community and the work of the region are aligned and working towards the same vision for reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion. The recommendations of this report are foundational to the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan, both as an investment and also in the way the work should be done. Finding new ways to work differently with community that is responsive and one that nourishes the work already being done by community to improve the safety and well-being of all residents in the Waterloo region. I'd like to end by thanking the Coalition of Muslim Women for their courage and long-standing leadership in the area of combating hate and phobia in our region, and for their ongoing collaboration with the region on this shared journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, Fauzia Mazhar, this is the report that she was referring to. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to also thank staff and the coalition and Ms. Mazhar for presenting tonight. This was very helpful, and I'd like to move the motion, the recommendation.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation is written before you. It goes A through F, and Fauzia Beg did a very good job, as did Jeff, of highlighting the detail underneath the motion. Do I have somebody to second that? Okay, Councillor Vrvanovich, and you have the floor.
Thanks, Chair Redmond, and thanks to both Fauzias for the work that's been done to get this before us today. Fauzia Beg from a staff level, and Fauzia Mazhar and the many women involved in the coalition for their passionate work on this incredibly important issue. And I think we can't not emphasize that we're dealing with this in the week that in fact was the International Day for the elimination of racial discrimination. And I think it's appropriate, in fact, that we're dealing with it in this week, because this has been an increasingly serious, disturbing trend in terms of actions that we have seen across our country, and quite frankly here in our own community. And there's work that needs to be done. And I think this set of recommendations speaks to that. Inevitably, there will be more work that needs to be done, even beyond this, but there always needs to be a starting point. And I think this reflects that and speaks to the kind of values that we share as a region, and the kind of work that we're trying to do both at the region and within the 7 area municipalities. And I particularly like the collaborative approach that we're looking to undertake and build support at the local municipalities on this as well. And certainly I'm prepared to take it back to Kitchener in that regard, and we'll reach out to Fauzia Mazhar to follow up on that. So thank you, and look forward to seconding and supporting it. And I'll ask for a recorded vote.
Thank you. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. I get all my equipment in the right place here. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to both Fauzias. It's not lost on me, but even though this speaks to Islamophobia, it really speaks to a broader issue in the community, and some deep-seated issues that exist for some parts of our community. And, I think, again, even though this focuses in some ways on Islamophobia, I think you've highlighted also that it reaches across groups that are disadvantaged and discriminated against. And so just a great thank you for the leadership of the Coalition of Muslim Women on this topic and in the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all involved in bringing this report back tonight now with all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. It seems like we've got a win-win here, something that the region can be proud of and move forward with, and something that the Coalition of Muslim Women advocated for and worked very hard for us to bring forward. I'm hoping that this model that's been developed in the report is suggesting that it's just a starting point of community needs, and it's going to take more conversation, difficult conversations, more research, and with the understanding that there's probably more recommendations that are going to be coming forth and action that will continue. I think the coalition with the provides ongoing support to service those that are affected, and provides able community training with our partnership. And so this initiative and the funding that the region's prepared to put it, I think, demonstrates that the region's commitment eliminating Islamophobia and injustices in our community are taken very seriously. So I'm looking forward to the difficult work that is ahead, and that we can find many, many ways as a region that we can continue to support this. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much. There's been a recorded vote requested. I see no more hands, so I will turn the floor over to Will.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Chair Redmond?
In favor.
Councillor Vanovic?
In favor?
Councillor Jaworski?
In favor.
Councillor Clark?
In favor.
Councillor Jowett?
Favor?
Councillor Erb?
In favor.
Councillor Nowak?
In favor.
Councillor Kiefer?
In favor.
Councillor McGarry?
In favor.
Councillor Armstrong?
In favor.
Councillor Harris? Councillor Shantz?
In favor.
Councillor Strickland?
In favor.
Councillor Foxton?
In favor.
Councillor Galloway? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That is a unanimously supported motion in Fauzia B, Jenny Smith, and Jess Schelling. Thank you all very much for making sure that this happened. And I liked how Councillor Erb said it was the T's crossed and the I's dotted. So this is a good night and just one more step along a very long journey. So thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of our community. Colleagues, we'll now go back to a motion to approve minutes from the previous minutes. They are listed. It is 8.1 through 8.5. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Strickland, seconded by Councillor Clark. Please use your icons to vote, and this is accepting closed council meetings, and committee of the whole, and a special committee council. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. There are communications which you have received in your information package for March 16th. That has been distributed electronically, as well as another item that came in separately and was distributed from the Church of St. John the Evangelist. So you all should have that under advisement. I see no questions. I now entertain a motion to go into committee of the whole to consider reports. I need a mover. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your icons to vote yes or no, and that is that council go into the committee of the whole to consider reports. That is carried. Colleagues, there are finance reports. We can deal with them all with one motion. It's 11.11 to 11.1.9. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor Strickland. Councillor Jowett, are you? Okay, so they have been moved and seconded. Councillor Jaworski, are you voting with your hand? Okay, please use your icons to vote yes or no for the finance reports.
Through the chair, I'd just like to do a shout out to staff on the Weber Street reconstruction for taking into consideration the needs of the businesses on there by trying to limit as much as possible the road closures, and also the taking into account the active transportation needs of our students in our community by trying to ensure that any full road closure takes place during the summer months. I think that was excellent work and really a good thought on active transportation of student needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So colleagues, that has been carried. Okay. We'll now vote on approval for the summary of the Committee of the Whole from March 8th, 2022. If I could have a mover. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Strickland. And this is the summary of the Committee of the Whole from March 8th. If you'd use your icons to vote yes or no. Colleagues, that is carried. We have already dealt with Coalition of Muslim Women recommendation. Report from the regional chair. I just wanted to make a small reflection, and I know that it's been a long night, but Tim Brubaker pointed out to me that tomorrow night would be exactly 2 years since our very first virtual meeting. And I just want to give a shout out to our staff and our clerk's department, current and people who are no longer here because they've retired, to say, well done. This was uncharted territory and it felt really strange, and now it feels like old hat, and that's because all of these amazing people have made it happen. So I just want to give a shout out to our staff. And now I've lost my place. Hang on. Regional clerk, Will has nothing. That's why we love him. Matters under Committee of the Whole. There is a summary of Housing Affordability Task Force. We did hear from a delegation already, and we have Danielle DeFields and Rod Regier to introduce the report, and Craig Dyer is here also to answer questions. So I will, Rod, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. I can, thank you, Chair Redmond. I can provide some remarks, and then Danielle and Craig are available to answer questions as well. In summary, the province, as we all know, appointed a task force at the end of December to recommend ways to accelerate progress in closing the housing supply gap and improve housing affordability. The Affordability Task Force report was released on February the 8th, included 55 recommendations, as the delegation earlier has outlined. They focused on 5 key theme areas: a need to increase the housing density, the desire to remove zoning that only allows low density single and semi-detached homes, the need to depoliticize the housing approvals process, ways to prevent inefficiencies in the appeals process, and to provide financial support to municipalities that build more housing. The briefing note that you have before you today was jointly prepared by Community Planning and Finance with some input from our Waterloo Region Housing team. It provides some high-level preliminary thoughts on the recommendations of the task force report. Appendix A provides individual preliminary responses to each of the 55 recommendations for your consideration, either providing general support, identifying areas that need further consideration, or identifying those recommendations that staff do not support. In terms of the recommendations that we think generally align with policies, programs, or plans, we are supportive of removing zoning that only allows for low density single and semi-detached housing, and improving efficient development approvals process, and at the Ontario Land Tribunal. However, we have identified an area of significant concern regarding an underlying assumption in the report, which is that municipalities and their councils primarily cause barriers to increasing the housing supply. There are quite a few factors outside of the municipal realm that contribute to accelerating the pace of housing supply, including access to skilled trades and supply chain issues, as well as factors on the demand side that adversely affect affordability. Staff have identified some significant concerns with restoring the rights of developers to appeal official plans and municipal comprehensive reviews, as well as certain recommendations suggesting a poor understanding of municipal finance and the inner workings of development charges in particular. Should there be any draft legislation or regulations that are released based on the work of this task force and their recommendations, the staff will provide further analysis and commentary to Regional Council at the appropriate time. So thank you very much, Chair Redmond, and Danielle and Craig and I can respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Rod. So this is for information, and I'm sure we've all been seized with the Housing Affordability Task Force from the province. Are there any questions? So this is an analysis by staff, and it's a very good one. It's very thorough. I don't see any questions, so Rod, you've left the council members speechless. The next agenda item is a finance update and year-end financial results, and I'll call on Mr. Lochner to introduce, and I believe Mr. Dyer is here to answer all the tough questions. So over to you, Mr. Lochner.
That's exactly right, Madam Chair. Thank you. And I know it's getting late. If Council could indulge me, we did want to spend the time to reflect on what we did in 2021. Really happy to introduce this item, and as you said, Mr. Dyer, we'll answer the tough questions as well as provide some highlights from a financial perspective. I know we all want to leave last year in the past, but I really think it's important that we pause for a moment and just acknowledge the progress and collaboration that happened over the last year in this community. I was thinking about this and the fact that we made any progress at all when we were leading the pandemic response and so much on. I think that's really inspiring, and it's a credit to the community, our partnerships, to the 3,700 team members at the region who provide service every single day, and so many other community organizations, including our area municipalities. I'd also like to say thank you to you, Council, for your courageous leadership. The leadership you've provided over the last few years has been foundational to our success as a team, and it's certainly bearing fruit. I remember talking about the vision in 2020 that you set and pushing us to think beyond COVID to get us through the pandemic, but also come out stronger as a community. And then last year, you set the bar even higher. You helped us navigate through the unexpected, and you told us to push on. I also want to thank our many community partners. Your work makes Waterloo Region all the things that we want it to be and keeps us all aiming higher. There are so many great examples in the report. I won't go over all of them, but I did want to highlight a few. We're experiencing record-breaking passenger growth at YKF, as we expect over 700,000 passengers this year alone. 4,000 local businesses successfully participated in the COVID Safe Ambassador Program, a true partnership effort. We've been working hard to advance the future King Victoria Transit Hub, and that will improve much-needed connectivity along the Toronto to Waterloo Region Innovation Corridor. We're engaging with residents in more meaningful ways and in different ways, highlighting our strategic plan, the vision that you set as Council, and our community partnerships through meaningful storytelling. Council endorsed the Transform Waterloo Region Climate Action Strategy. That sets an 80% target reduction in carbon emissions by 2050 and forms a critical part of the region's 2022 business plan. You may remember you also approved the Building Better Futures Plan, which will see the development of up to 25 new affordable homes over the next 5 years, increasing the number of units per year from 50 units a year not too long ago to over 500 units this year and in the years ahead. The YW Block Line Supportive Housing Project will add 41 new supportive housing units to the region. We announced 2 new rapid housing initiatives in Kitchener that will see 18 units operated by the Working Centre. We launched the Equity Investment Fund in 2021 to improve the economic, social, and cultural health and well-being of Indigenous, Black, racialized, and marginalized groups who experience discrimination and exclusion. And we saw a great result of that again tonight. And we created a community safety and well-being plan framework that has truth and reconciliation at its heart. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Remember, we did all that while vaccinating close to 90% of residents 5 years of age and over, while setting up mass vaccination sites with our partners, mobile health services, and community clinics. Essentially, we completed all of this while leading the response to the largest, most complex logistical operation of our lifetime. And I hope we never see a pandemic again. Looking ahead, 2022 offers so many opportunities to work differently with community and partners around this foundation that you set and that the team and our partners set. Even with all this incredible work, our reality still includes challenges that sometimes seem insurmountable at times. And again, earlier tonight with the opioid crisis discussion, that's a great example. But I'm confident that again, with the partnerships and the innovative spirit of this region, we too will make inroads on that. Again, as I look back at last year, I come out of that with great hope for what this organization can do when we're not in a pandemic, great hope for what this community can do in the years ahead. Again, a sincere thanks to each of you who played a part in this story of the success of our community last year. We have much more to do in the year ahead, and as a team, I can assure you, we're ready. Craig, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Lochner, and thank you, Madam Chair, for an opportunity just to say a few words about the year-end financial update included in the report on your agenda this evening. I'll start off by saying that the overall 2021 financial position resulted in a modest surplus of about $12.5 million, $9 million for tax-supported services, about $1.2 million for user rates, and $2.3 million for police services. And this represents about 1.7% of property tax and user rate revenues approved in the 2021 budget. And I would also say is largely in line with the projections that we had most recently provided to Council, I believe back in October or November of last year. We'll be applying the Council-approved surplus policy to use the surplus to offset anticipated future budget pressures. And we'll be doing this by lowering our reliance on debt financing. So approximately $7 million of the tax-supported surplus will be used in place of debt financing for various asset renewal projects in 2022. And that will allow us to avoid debt servicing costs of approximately $800,000 per year for 10 years, starting in 2023. The continued impact of the pandemic on our overall 2021 operating position was offset to a great extent by financial support from the federal and provincial governments. The region is grateful for these supports, and it's anticipated that additional assistance will be needed into the future, particularly with respect to the emergency shelter system and public transit. COVID-19 restrictions, supply chain issues, a few scheduling delays, and some project changes did impact our ability to complete capital projects as contemplated in 2021. That being said, we recorded approximately $375 million of capital projects investments, and we were able to make significant progress on a number of important projects, including the Grand River Transit maintenance and storage facility on Northfield Drive, a number of different upgrades to regional facilities and housing units, and numerous water, wastewater, and transportation infrastructure projects. The year-end audit is nearing completion, and our 2021 audited financial statements will be presented to Audit Committee on April 21st and at Regional Council on April 27th. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dyer. Colleagues, what we have in front of us is a motion that I'm going to look for a mover and seconder that basically says receive this plan update, approve the preliminary financial results for 2021, and apply the surplus allocation policy. So moved by Councillor Foxton. Are you moving it, Councillor Jowett, or seconding it, or do you have a question? Okay, moved by Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Jowett. Councillor Jowett, do you want to make any comments?
Just quickly, Chair, I just want to thank Craig for his very, very comprehensive approach to certainly all of these balls that got thrown at us during COVID, and the way that he's carried us through and certainly warned us of some of the looming pressures that are in front of us. So thank you, Craig, for everything you do. above and beyond the call of duty, and of course your staff that works with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Kiefer, did you want to make a comment as the mover?
No, thanks.
Okay. I see no more hands, so I would ask you to use your icons to vote yes or no on this motion. Colleagues, that is carried. We now need a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. Moved by Councillor Jaworski, seconded by Councillor McGarry. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. So the Committee of the Whole has rise and Council has resumed. I now need a motion to adopt the proceedings of the Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor Erb. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is carried, colleagues. We have no motions, no notices of motion, any unfinished business, other business, questions? We now need a motion to enact the bylaws first, second, and third readings, moved by Councillor Schatz, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. That is, excuse me, carried. We now need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor McGarry, seconded by Councillor Foxton. Please use your icons to vote yes or no. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong not only voted with his icons, but both of his hands. Thank you all very much. Very productive evening. Stay safe.
Good night, everyone.
Right.